Hi, my name is Jordy Izzard. I am Senior Associate Director of SAIS Alumni Relations in Washington, D.C. And I'm here today on March 27th, 2017 in Manila, Philippines with Marshall Mays, who started in the Bologna program in 1981 and went for a year. He subsequently stayed in Europe working for another year and a half, then did 3 semesters at the Wharton program, and did some other work in the U.S., and finally finished his last semester in Washington, D.C., and graduated with his MA from SAIS in 1989. It's such a pleasure to have you here today, and we're going to just have a little bit of a conversation. And why don't we start with what originally brought you to SAIS?
Well, at the time I made the decision, I was in the U.S. Navy finishing up 4 years that paid for my undergraduate school. My intent had always been to work in the international sphere. And I had this silly idea that I needed more education rather than experience. So I looked around, chose SAIS over the other programs because it had more in-location experience. Bologna, so that's where I chose to go. Fortunately, SAIS was okay with that, and so I started leaving the Navy in the Persian Gulf in August of 1981, and 1 week later starting classes in Italian in Bologna. And from there I roared on. I decided, well, maybe we should add a business degree. So I decided to join the brand new joint program with Wharton. Left the United States as soon as possible and moved to Japan. Then 3 years later finished my SAIS degree by taking the exam in Bologna, but getting a degree in Washington. I moved to Japan based on a program I thought up while I was still in SAIS in Bologna. Actually, it was the intervening period in Salzburg. They have a Salzburg weekend. I was studying industrial policy, and I thought, what do I really want to do? I said, well, I'm interested in creating public goods, working in the public sector, but not really for the public sector. So I conceived the idea of working for public service through the private sector. Not a unique idea, but at the time it seemed to have an epiphany. And I decided what I wanted to do was work on economic development through channeling funds on better contracts than the traditional state-to-state or state bank to state bank transfer of funds, which was the norm in the 50s and 60s and early 70s. So I conceived what was now called venture capital or other funds, which became the norm within the next 10 years. So I was not necessarily prescient, but I was thinking in terms of economic development in a slightly different perspective than Wall Street was. So I thought, well, I should get a little bit more experience on the commercial side. And I thought, well, a business degree wouldn't hurt. Again, it's relationships more than knowledge. And so I moved on to the joint degree. So I got lots of education I didn't really necessarily need. And I continually tell students, by the way, your next question, what to do in life. I said, well, if you think you need more education to get what you want to get, you're wrong. What you need is more experience. Rather than take 2 degrees in 4 years, I said I could have done something quite different, take 2 different jobs in 2 different parts of the world, starting from scratch in different business sectors, and learned a lot, gotten paid for it, and been completely developed in my knowledge of human beings, which is what education teaches you nothing about. And so I think that if you really want to be a transaction person, rather than merely a planning person, experience is more important than education, but education helps.
So let's just stop for 1 second.
Yes.
That's what got you to SAIS, right?
Yeah, I'm crossing through the questions because they quite matter. Because I got to
absolutely.
SAIS because I wanted education, I thought, and they would have some experience. But in fact, I learned later that because I was doing things that were quite different, as SAISers do, I really need more experience. SAIS provided me a good framework, and I value that degree much more than I do the Wharton degree, which is a more technical degree that you can get out of a book. The good part about the SAIS degree is I was early, and therefore I could more or less pick and choose my courses. I skipped the entire first year courses and picked courses up the ladder that I wanted. I picked faculty. My point was that, well, you meet classmates, but you really get to know faculty by taking their course or auditing their course. So I took lots of courses because I thought the faculty were cool. And that was a very, very effective solution, I thought.
So great. So tell us a little bit more about being a student at SAIS and who were those faculty and students?
Well, in Bologna, I just sort of took the course. There was not a lot of options there. I got a little bit of variety. I took the usual Western European comp scan of professors, but I took a little bit of extra material in, say, strategy was an odd course they had at the time. Dealt with military and state politics, so it was geopolitical globaloni. But they had a very good faculty member there who was new and trying to shake up the tree, and he shook it up too much and got removed later on. But he was a good professor. And that was quite helpful, I thought. That fit with as a transition from my military leadership background to global politics, and it actually helped me understand better the Western European model, which was being developed at the time. Other than that, I think probably the good experience I had was unintended, as I had to spend a year between the Bologna program and the SAIS and the Wharton program to take the GMATs. I took a year in which to do independent study. So one of my faculty members, who was not a very strong faculty member, to be honest with him about him, was somewhere, he lived near Bonn, but he was quite knowledgeable, and he helped me connect with people who I needed to know in Germany and Western Europe to collect data on current practice at the time of European planning for economic stability. The early days of the EMU, what later became the ECU, and the Euro. And so the planning, the beginning of public planning, where policymakers were coordinating their financial and central bank strategies for the first time, were beginning. And what I was doing a statistical and policy comparison between Eurobond offshore pricing and the process of economic planning. Of course, the logic is that better coordination, better predictability in the market's view of coordination leads to more stability and more stable relationships between interest rate trends. So the yield curves, the transition of yield curves, should reflect and improve coherence as the euro or EMU become a more solid currency. Then it was still airy-fairy ideas. No one thought about it. So I was, and again, a bit ahead of the time, and no one was interested in my publication, so it died on the shelf somewhere. But it was a good experience for me because I met some very interesting people in Europe, in spite of having a lame professor.
And then you went to Wharton, and you ended up in Washington. What were your thoughts about being a student in Washington?
Well, Washington was a good experience because I had lots of other things behind me. I was landing, and I said, at that time I decided, well, where I wanted to start was Asia. So even though I was a Western European comp grad, I had one more course to take. Everything else I took was Asia. And one of the greatest professors I met was actually in the Wharton. She's now retired. I think actually she's deceased. But she also taught at the Foreign Service Institute. And she was the great Asia hand at the Foreign Service Institute and at Wharton at the time. This was, again, 35 years ago. And that helped a lot because I'd already seen and been living with the U.S. Navy in Southeast Asia a lot. So I had first-hand experience, but this gave me a framework in anthropological, linguistic, cultural history. And that actually is important because in everything I've done since then, have pursued what you might call a values theory approach to management, looking at how culture, whether it be the family, religion, region, language we study in, affects our accumulation of data, how we perceive the world, and how we decide based on that perceptions. It affects our decisions in a fundamental way that we can't change instantaneously. And so it creates behavioral groups around cultural nodes. Now, if you're looking at finance, global finance, that tells you a lot about how to price securities and how the market changes its thinking based on public policy. There's a little bit of study right now working on connecting public policy to market modeling, but it looks too much at instantaneous pricing rather than longer-term trends. So I've been working in that area forever, but no one's paid me for that work. They paid me to be a fund manager, which is what I did as soon as I left SAIS.
Tell us a little bit about your career once you graduated from SAIS in '89. So you went to Japan. That's where it started.
Yeah. Well, I left academics in '85. I started work in '85 in a research institute in Philadelphia, where was I going? Northeast. Anyway, near Philadelphia. And I then moved immediately to a job in corporate finance in Tokyo, starting in '86. So while I was there, I began to work on other aspects of investment. But my desire was to follow a plan I had set while I was in Salzburg, thinking about the world, the big picture. What I called the 10-year plan, which gave me sort of a long view of what I really wanted to do, what I needed to acquire to get that skill set and that experience. So I went about acquiring experience systematically. And the first goal was to understand how the sell side, or the securities broker side of the market worked. Because I intended to work on the so-called buy side, the portfolio side of it. So I turned down some nice job offers in the U.S. for portfolio manager, because I didn't want to live in the United States, to work in the corporate finance side in Japan. And with that process, I began the trend since then. I've never left Asia, per se. I've become what I call an egg, an Asian. I'm only white on the outside. And the process meant that I had to look at the world in many fragmented ways and then reassemble it for myself. So that was my whole method, if you will. And the outcome has been different than I would have predicted, and some turns have been quite different. But the general plan has moved along that line. Unfortunately, because I had this view of where I wanted to go, I was never really quite suitable in large institutions. And a lot of what people do coming out of a degree like SAIS, they want to work for a large institution and end up living in a large institution. And I was never happy, which is one reason why I never worked full-time for the ADB, but worked as a consultant on the side, project-by-project programs, because I had personally problems dealing with a fairly rigid institution. And that was my fault, but that was the way it is. And so as a result, I've always worked for small groups after two big jobs, Chase Manhattan and then State Street. I left State Street when it went from being small to being a giant. I set up the office in Tokyo for them, ran the trust bank for a while. I was running the whole business there, and decided this was going nowhere because the bureaucracy had grown tenfold in the time I had built my, 3 years, which is too much. So the politics became more. I needed to be on the plane every week going to Boston to keep in touch with the decision makers in Boston to run my job in Tokyo. I said, this is not the way to run life. So I left that. At that time, I'd acquired good language ability in Japanese.
So what year are we in now?
This is 94.
Okay.
And so I left the job, nice, comfortable job in State Street. I could have been, if you will, rich by retiring that job. But I decided that I wanted to do something different. I was becoming too much of Mr. Japan. And so I moved from Japan to Hong Kong to work for a Japanese company. Well, nonetheless, they were relatively small on the ground there, Nikko Securities, and I became their Asian strategist. So I was paid to talk to fund managers and pick their brains.
Okay.
And of course they thought, oh, he's just a dumb broker. But in fact, because I had been working on the buy side before, I could see exactly what they were doing. I thought it'd be more helpful because I could think about how they saw the problem, not the broker side. And that made me fairly effective and I think quite popular. So for 3 years I ran around the world speaking to everyone who invested in Asia outside of Japan. But I was based in Hong Kong. And then along came the unexpected, not really unexpected, by then we knew it was going to happen. It was the Asian financial crisis. I mean, the precursors for it were obvious by the time Japan had 2 or 3 years of restructuring itself, certainly by 84, it's quite apparent. But it blew off in 97. All the excess lending led to a collapse finally in the credit bubble of Southeast Asia. And with that, all the jobs disappeared. So I had prepared for a job which no one really wanted then. So I started my own business, and since then I've been doing.
Oh wow! So you started, and tell us the name of your business.
Emerging Alpha Advisors. The idea of dealing with emerging markets, and we look for the alpha, which is the element of performance, which is consistently about the person, the character of the fund manager. It's not based on leverage or other factors. It's based on the decision-making process. And so the idea was to work on both listed and non-listed investment vehicles to help them improve development in the area. And in the process, I helped a lot of fund managers. I managed money for a while myself, but I was never very good at raising capital because I've always been a two-handed economist. If you want to raise capital, it's only one hand, my way or the highway, and I'm going to make you $1 billion. So you have to be a good liar to be a good fundraiser. And I decided that was what I really wanted to do. So I continue to work on advising fund managers, and I probably advised almost every fund manager in Asia up until about 5 or 6 years ago when I shifted more toward venture capital myself and investing in various businesses with other people. So that's what we do now. We have 1 or 2 projects at a time we're investing, trying to build up. And that led us to the current dairy business I'm working with now, which is on the surface completely in a different planet from everything else I've done. But not really. It's about changing things on a fundamental level.
And tell us about the cheese business. How does that fit into this?
Yes. Well, if you look at problems in various developing countries, usually it's because it starts with a top-down solution, probably from foreign aid development encouraging, partly from lack of infrastructure, partly from corruption, part of just poor education systems, lots of problems. Asia, because of its previous colonial roots, does not produce much dairy product. Most of the dairy product is imported from the former colonial hinterlands as low-cost product and some high-cost product, but most of it is imported, anywhere between 70 and 95%. Even Japan and Korea import about 60% of their dairy products. So there's not a lot made locally. But if you have fresh dairy products, especially mozzarella, burrata, ricotta, things of that sort, it's entirely different when it's fresh, when it's been a week old, even 2 weeks old as it's been flown in. So I thought, well, what we could change, we want to change the agricultural sector, is move away from the large-scale, easy-to-manage property area, which is vegetables and fruits. That has its own problems. And move to dairy, which is the least developed sector. It'll be difficult. We'll swim upstream for a while, but we'll create a market niche that no one else has bothered to create, because everyone has big money in this business, is big money. And they need a $100 million investment just to justify the administrative overhead to go into the market. So most of Asia is going to get not serious attention from the big majors, whether it be North America, Europe, or Australia, New Zealand. And we thought to focus on a specific part of the sector, which is again underdeveloped but has a lot of potential, the water buffalo. So I thought, well, connect the water buffalo with mozzarella, which is everyone understands is from Italy. And we decided to create an Italian dairy business based on the water buffalo here. And the hybrids used here are actually superior to the normal animal used in the south of Italy, where I spent a lot of time when I was in Bologna, bicycling around. And so we thought, well, we have a lot of raw material here. The problem, why no one else has done this, is integrating the value stream is hard. Many parts are well developed, many parts are not, but the glue is not there. So our approach was to come in and create, well, initially we worked with the upstream, trying to create improvements in the upstream so we had a stable supply. But we discovered that was okay. Not large scale, but basically okay. It could be developed. And so in the process I learned all the weaknesses and the steps we thought we needed to work out that program. The problem was our partner at the time on the downstream was not very good. They didn't really understand the big picture, so we parted ways. And then 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I decided to invest more money on creating a brand going downstream. So we created a team, brought Italians in from Italy, trained staff, developed a pilot program, proved the product, then moved to our own dairy plant about an hour north of Manila. And now we produce 12 or 13 cheeses and fabulous yogurt that is unlike anything else except what you get in the south of Italy. So we say the taste of Campania is our byline. We call it, we name it Latteria d'Ischia because Ischia is the island in the Bay of Naples where one of our big assistants in this dairy expertise came from. And it's also one of the big places where they make a lot of mozzarella. So while we focus on Campania, of course, there's Apulia and various other areas. And so we make cheeses from many parts of Italy, not just the south, but also in the north. We make a wonderful cheese we call Morone di Veneto, but it's basically a taleggio. And a taleggio, there are a few people who understand taleggio in the Philippines, but not a lot. But we make it with buffalo milk, not cow milk. Likewise, we make stracchino. We age it a little bit and it becomes a wonderful blued cheese. So there are lots of things we've done that were not done in Italy, but we have some original, maybe half dozen authentic original Italian products. So we provide big hotels like this one with their dairy products.
We thank you also for providing cheese at the latest regional event in Hong Kong for SAIS Alumni. So I personally tasted 5 or 6 of those cheeses and can attest to their deliciousness.
Well, good. We hope that we create an interest in the wealthy neighborhoods of what I call Asia, the 12 cities, from Seoul down to Jakarta and Bangkok, for a high-quality local product. And with that example, to create competition. Because my view is you won't change the landscape of agriculture unless you bring capital in. Because the traditional problem is it's land held by the old families. They won't invest effort or risk because they're basically rentier. So if you want to change, you have to show you can inject technology both in management systems and in market development and leverage the business, probably leverage in the terms of financial leverage, the brand, and build something. So we're building a brand out of scratch. It takes about 4 or 5 years for it to take root, and we're almost halfway there.
Terrific.
And the goal is to start exports to Hong Kong formally this year instead of informally. And with that, attract more capital and basically transform the dairy sector to something which the foreign big companies would want to come into. And therefore you have the capital required to change mindset.
Right. Terrific. Well, you started to tell us a little bit about this earlier, but in thinking about your career and what you've done and the twists and turns that have happened, tell us a little bit about what advice you might have for a current SAIS student today.
Right. Well, since I'm only about halfway through what I call my career, I've got another 30 years to kick ass, I think.
Okay.
I expect, well, maybe 25, okay. I'm only 62 at this point. So I think that the person should look at themselves just like that. There are going to be at least 2 or 3 lives they should live. They should think about the overall purpose they have. Because when you're young, coming into the program, maybe average age 25, 26, somewhere in that range, you think you know everything, but of course, with hindsight, you know nothing. You know what you feel, you know you're motivated by this, but life changes various things. And only in hindsight do we know what our really core values were then. It's really hard to know now how it is. It's just life. So I say, accept the fact you will change with time, and your efforts at change will change you further. Every encounter you have will make you change further. So don't try to solve all the problems of the world right one, but think about, you may have a bigger outcome, not just your family, but other things you want to do. You may not want to be a prophet, you may not want to be someone to be remembered, you may not want to be rich, but you have all these goals are part of the mix. Give yourself latitude to accumulate some wealth, but make it as much possible wealth of relationships. Wealth of capital helps a lot, in my experience, but I don't have a lot. Most of my wealth is in relationships, and that's proven to be much, much more dynamic in its effect than just having the money on the table. Money on the table is good, but you only need so much. Many people spend a lot of time getting too much of that. And so plan for acquiring relationships and experience in the first third of your career. Acquire knowledge, credibility, maintain integrity above all else. This is something everyone forgets. Integrity is the most important currency. And then in that second career, when you're ready to really do it, then you can use those resources. And you would have changed your mind, but you know more where you want to go. So don't think, I want to be a banker, whatever that means, your whole life. Because you choose very quickly that banks have very short attention span. So do security companies even worse. All big companies do these days. And with the evolution of IT, I believe, I spent a lot of time, by the way, I didn't touch that IT background. By the time the students who are watching this get to be my age, we will probably be at a point where they will be seeing immortality on the horizon. I'm not talking about science fiction, this is the transference. And so a lot of things will change as our ability to work with IT in ways we never thought before would happen. And that will destroy more and more jobs than many people can even imagine. So it requires creativity and flexibility. And that is what people should work on from the very beginning, because that will help you the whole way.
All right, terrific. Thank you so much for interviewing with us today, and I hope you have a wonderful one.